As you know, I'm your host, Trisha Ari, Senior Director of Operations. Today, we have Director of Business Process PMO for Global Operations and Supply Chain at Medtronic, Achilles Young. He comes to us with over 30 years of medical device experience and passion for continuous improvement. He was also a 2025 Brian Irk Leadership Award winner at Medtronic. Now, I'd like to turn this over to my friend, Achilles.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Trish. It is always a pleasure following after you after such an amazing introduction. The agenda for today, let's talk about recent activity in Orange County, the importance of due diligence, accurately calculating synergies, integration opportunities, and then we'll close it out with Q&A. So let's talk about recent mergers and acquisition activity in Orange County, California. This here is a bulletin that came from, I believe, Yahoo, was where I grabbed this from. Stryker concludes Inari Medical acquisition for $4.9 billion with a B. I thought it was important to see what the CEO and chair Kevin Lobo said. And notice what's highlighted there in the orange. We look forward to welcoming the talented Inari team to Stryker and working together. Yeah. What that tells me is that they are optimistic on getting change right. Let's look at another. Danaher's $9.9 billion Massimo deal marks one of 2026's largest medtech buyouts. Now that we have the optimistic side, let's look at the impact or how it was perceived by the market. Massimo shares jumped 31% toward the deal price, but Danaher's stock fell 6% on integration concerns. Interesting, right? What that tells you is it's the importance of getting this right. People understand that there are risks involved. So you have all of this money, all of these expectations. How do we make sure that these things go seamlessly or as close to seamless as possible? So now there are key phases in M&A activity. So let's talk about what this roadmap looks like. There's strategy and planning. So people are trying to figure out how do we find a way actually to incorporate this business to make our business grow? Yeah. They need to identify a target. They need to provide a proper valuation and do the due diligence. That's where we're going to focus a little bit today. We're talking about the negotiation and deal closing, right? One company wants 50 billion for their company, and the other company that's buying says, maybe 50 billion is too much. Let's start talking about a few million. And then we have to negotiate where that happens. And then, of course, close the deal once all of the papers look good. And then finally, what I really want to focus on today, post-merger integration. So as you look through this roadmap here, you can see what's really important from my perspective are the synergies, which is what we're going to talk about, the integration plan, the execution plan, and then managing some of the risks based on the right due diligence. I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I have on a suit jacket. I have on a nice shirt. You guys can't tell I have on cologne, so I'm smelling all right. But the idea is that I don't come from the finance or the BD side. There's a quality lens to look at this through. There's an R&D lens, a regulatory lens. I'm looking at this through operational lens. So this quote I thought really makes sense. Perspective transforms challenges into opportunities and confusion into clarity. It is the lens through which we uncover the value in every moment. So I'm really going to be focused heavy on that value from an operational standpoint. However, after 30 years in the business and being involved in a few of these on the back end and the integration piece, hey, I've learned a few things along the way. So I hope your questions stretch me a little bit. And if I don't know, I'll tell you. So let's talk about due diligence. Once again, you see that we have the legal due diligence, financial due diligence, and then this operational piece. Let's think about this. Due diligence is critical to validate the target's value, uncover hidden liabilities, and assess risks directly impacting the transaction's success. So let that sink in. There's something called a pro forma. A pro forma is a financial plan or roadmap on how this business has been evaluated and how this business is going to perform into the larger business that it gets assimilated and integrated into so that financially the company meets targets. Yeah. So if that's the case, from an operational standpoint, what's important about due diligence? Well, the first thing I have to tell you is that there's a concept called hidden factory. In the med device space, we're making devices that either improve lives or save lives. Yeah. So now these devices involve manufacturing. You're thinking to yourself as you are this deal creator and saying, okay, they have paperwork, SOPs, standard operating procedures. Then you're thinking they have a warehouse full of stuff. Some of it is raw material, some of them are subassemblies, some are finished goods. And then you got to ship that stuff out. And you say to yourself, okay, what are they doing here? Trust me, team, what's on paper is not all of what they're doing. So it's important to go and do that assessment, because if that's not done appropriately, when you think of the integration, what's going to happen is something that we thought we could just deal with because it's a small thing truly ends up being a big thing because they're doing something that isn't documented. And because we're part of a regulated industry, you find out that you have to deal with that, get it documented, and what they're doing, ensure it's qualified and validated. Yeah. So hidden factories, remember that. Another piece that's really important in here is quality landmines. When due diligence happens, there's always a quality representative. Yeah. That quality representative is going through and checking off that, hey, we're doing our basic things per our FDA guidelines or our other notified body guidelines. But what we often miss is that as they are performing, there are certain KPIs, key performance indicators, that are just telling the story of how this acquired manufacturing or business is going to perform. And what I found is missed more often than it should be is that the trend of the data of how stable that manufacturing floor is actually a scary story. So you'll see things too close to the limit, or we'll have outer limits more often than we should, or the data looks very erratic, not stable. So just another little gold nugget. And then what's also important are the people. We have to figure we're human beings, we're not robots. So, how will these human beings who are talented have experience in a certain business? How is that going to translate and get integrated into the integrating company? Well, there has to be an assessment on the experts, the SMEs they're called, subject matter experts throughout the business, and make sure that we can download their knowledge, make sure that we have chemistry, and ensure that they're willing to fall under the new quality, regulatory, and operational umbrella. Let's go into the next thing here. M&A synergies. Synergy is a very fancy word. I think I first heard it back when I was in my teens, and maybe it was some teacher in high school who said synergy, and it sounded like such a fun and dynamic word. Well, when you're in corporate America, after a while, that word gets a little bit overused. Yeah. So let me try to find some in between definition of it for you. Synergy is about taking what's a strength from the company that's going to be acquired, and then taking strengths from the company that is acquiring and finding a way to make it more, to make it better, to make it have momentum from the very beginning. So when it says here, why is that critical to understand the synergies of what's powerful, what's a superpower of each of the companies? Because everyone thinks that these things work together like a puzzle seamlessly. And that hasn't been the case in my experience. What I found out is that everyone has an optimistic target, an optimistic projection. Well, experience will tell you is that, yeah, all those synergies don't happen automatically. They need to be worked on, nourished, and self corrected, and then corrected from outside with leadership. So then you need to have a worst case scenario, a most likely scenario, and a best case scenario. And of course, you always want to go toward best case. But remember, we're human beings. So as human beings, we need to give space, grace, time, and coaching so that this transaction can reach its full expectation. Timing. We all want to rush it. We want to see that these things work immediately, and they don't. So, once again, if we understand the synergies, it's like cooking a really good meal. Got to do the sauce first. Yeah. Don't do the spaghetti yet because it won't come out al dente. You got to get the timing just right so when it's ready to present or reach the pro forma milestones, it gets there. My experience, because I'm an engineer and have functioned as that for a large part of my career, I realize the importance of these synergies, looking at it within a framework. The analysis method of my choice is called 7M's. The 7M's are broken down there for you. And to give you an example of that, we had a giant braider, 64 braid braider that was making a portion of a catheter, really complex. And at the time, it was cutting edge. Because we didn't have experience with a braider of that particular size, we needed to make sure that we learned. Well, the first thing that we learned was the maintenance. We assumed it was just going to be, oh, instead of 32, you have 64, do either twice the maintenance or you might have to do something different. No, it was a completely different beast. And by talking with someone who also was challenged from an English standpoint, English wasn't their first language, we actually had to spend more time than we understood in order to take his understanding and translate it to our teams and get that synergy just with our maintenance teams. One of the basic M's most people don't even think about. Next thing is scenario planning. When we talk about best case, worst case, and a most likely case, what we really have to understand is that these need to be modeled and modeled in such a way that the leadership and that the core teams are understanding where you fall on that probability map. And let's be realistic about it. We all want to make as money as quickly as we can. For those of us who are more altruistic, we want to get the product to the patients as quick as we can. Okay, if we don't have a set cadence of monitoring our synergies, seeing where we fall on this probability of highly optimistic versus worst case, then the team starts to fall apart. So having the team on this realistic journey really will help that integration to have weight and for people to really respect the expectations and the performance from the team. And people want to be on board as they see a win happening. And this last piece on incorporate KPIs into the tier management process. For those of you who may not know what tier management is usually there's 6 to 7 levels, right? Depending on their company. But level 0, that's on the production floor. These are the people transforming raw materials into products using these standard operating procedures. Tier 7 is your executive committee. Yeah. So in between 0 and 7, how do you translate what's going on across all the functions? You have to have aligned key performance indicators. And these are really important. You can't just pick out how many did you make, how many were bad. Those are just table stakes. You need to pick out the right KPIs for the businesses and where we are in order for us to really have our fingers on the pulse of what's going on with that business. And then we have to adapt and move with fluidity as a KPI goes out of its bounds that we've given it. So what do I mean by that? Let's just take easy one. Let's say a yield. Well, when the company was going to be acquired and due diligence said they had a yield of about 70%, meaning they made 100 of whatever they're making, and 30 of them they had to throw in the trash. 70 of them were good, could be boxed up and ready to be shipped out and go to a customer. Our goal is to see that 70% for the first 3 months stay at 70%. Well, if we start seeing that we lost an additional 2, right? Now we're at 50%. We need to have that as a KPI, but underneath that, what are they being scrapped for? So we need another KPI that says we're scrapping them because they're contaminated. We're scrapping them because they failed a functional test, and so forth. So depending on that, we find the right KPIs, we put it on our tier boards, we share that out at our report outs, and now the integration is truly finding the synergy with our 7Ms, yeah? And then, of course, the pro forma. How should we be performing week over week, month over month? All right, so number 3, 5 tips for a successful merger and acquisition integration. First and foremost, we need a clear integration strategy. And that's really not a problem from what I've seen. You can imagine with the Danaher deal, if we're talking almost $10 billion, there is a clear integration strategy. So I'm going to once again call that table stakes. But establishing strong leadership and governance, people think they have this. But once again, in integrations and mergers, think about families coming together. And maybe the best example of merger and acquisition is the Brady Bunch. If you all haven't seen the sitcom The Brady Bunch, I know it's from the 70s, you got to go and watch a few episodes, right? It was 2 separate families. A man had 3 sons, a woman had 3 daughters from a previous marriage, and they have to come and bring them together to make the Brady Bunch. And as they do this, they're like, how do I go through all these problems with these pre-teenage and teenage kids and making all this work? Well, it's strong leadership and governance is a really great way to think about that. And there's a few episodes where the dad and the mom and the maid really help keeping the family on track. Number 3, protect business momentum during integration. That goes to KPI monitoring. I hope you all know Peter Drucker, but the most famous quote from him that sticks with me is, whatever gets measured gets managed. Yeah. Identify quick wins to build momentum. For example, if the team, remember I was talking about the 70% yield, if we happen to get a 75% yield one week, celebrate that. Cookies and ice cream for everybody. People who are diabetic, you get carrot sticks. So take those moments in time as leadership to really celebrate the team. And now this creating a unified culture. We as human beings, once again, we enjoy success. This integration is scary. Change is always anxiety creating. So the things that we can do to minimize anxiety, to bolster successes, and to maintain that we are on this clear integration path per plan. And finally, if we're off plan, acknowledge it and address it quickly, we're on a road to success. So it says here, why is it critical? Well, it's critical because early proactive planning, starting with cultural due diligence and the creation of a detailed phase roadmap before the deal closes, helps us to avoid the major integration issues. And it says here, success depends on consistent, transparent communication, retaining key talent through incentives, and aligning operational systems, but most crucially, company cultures to meet goals. So, in my experience in this, I'm going to stick with this first bullet point. Leadership at the integration sites need to be thoroughly supported by the executive team. I like cars, always have, always will, I hope. And if you remember, people talk about a car having a new car smell. Everybody wants to keep the rims shiny. When you open up the hood, there's not even any oil on the engine block. Nowadays with new electric cars, right? There's no fraying of the wires. So shout out to the new electric cars. But with that being the case, as human beings, that shiny period, the new car smell period, doesn't last forever, and people lose interest. So the executive VPs, the C-suite, the high-level directors, these folks who were there in the beginning, following up, shaking hands, looking at reports, they go on to do the next thing. So now it's the leadership team that remains that needs to manage through how do we deal with the tough moments in time, the quality issues, a customer complaint, a supplier that's not performing as expected, personnel left earlier, and the $10,000 that we're giving them as golden handcuffs, they got a new set of handcuffs, and the $10,000 doesn't mean anything to them. So now we need to make sure that the leadership, they might say, I need a new hire quick. Or they come back and say, hey, I need to pull an expert from another part of the business quickly. The leadership team, the executive team have to work together to get that addressed super fast so that we don't lose momentum. Yeah. Also, that leadership and governance, we said we needed 14 people, and we needed 14 people for 10 months in order for us to reach a milestone. Well, if you pulled off 3 people because some new shiny thing came up or some huge FDA issue came up, I understand, but we better backfill the 3 people that we just lost. Don't make me just do it on my own because now the pro forma hasn't moved, but the resources have changed. And this is where leadership needs to really step in and feel supported. And then that way, their team members feel supported. Yeah. So, my last point here to make on this: nothing breeds success like success. Celebrate the wins, don't hide the stumbles. Conduct lessons learned often as part of the process. People get bored with lessons learned, make them fun. Make it part of the governance. And finally, establish the norms and how we're going to work together as team members, going from one culture to another to just one culture again. And hopefully, it's a culture with synergies that flourishes and becomes something even more powerful, more part of the vision of the acquiring company. So, I was a part of EV3 when it was acquired by Covidien.
Mm-hmm.
If you know EV3 with Brett Wall, the idea was that this was a culture of innovation. And the idea was that relationships with the doctor is what really mattered. So you needed to go from concept to market really fast and iterate. When Covidien came on, I mean, they're a staple company, right? Surgical instrumentation. So you're thinking, wow, you guys are doing staples and you're slow. And not, this is not disrespectful, but the way they came to us is, you need to just put on this huge system and make sure what you're doing is right, justified. What we found out, Pete, that really helped, and I have to give Tom Whalen respect due for this and the other leadership that was with him, is let the larger company know that there was something attractive about this smaller company, right? This culture of innovation and quickness. Allow a portion of that to continue to run. That might take some creativity, but it has to be because that's part of the DNA of that group. And then there were little nuggets of excellence. Yeah, we're not the multi-billion-dollar company, agreed. We don't have all the heavy hitters you do. But along this journey, this small company had done some pretty cool stuff on the production floor. You want to come and learn about that and see if we can scale it up? And the thing we had done there, Pete, was quality begins with me. That became a tagline for Covidien. I mean, for a portion of their businesses. And you're like, what? This little $180 million company or I think at the time it was 300 million. This is what they came up with. Well, let's take it and run. Then the other way on our end, right? We were like, they're slowing us down. They're slowing us down. Well, listen, they're slowing us down perhaps, but we're playing the long game here. We're getting products now to 200,000 patients with them and all of their channels. Team, don't you see we can immediately, or not immediately, but rather quickly get to 600,000 patients? So now we're taking something from each other that's once again that synergy. And I think the leadership, Pete, has to talk to that. The management has to talk to that. And then during town halls, that also needs to be spoken into, that we have something to share with each other. Yeah, really good question. I remember I touched on KPIs just a little bit. So let me double click as our new CE, our COO says here. Financial is what counts. Yeah. I just what it is. So make sure if you're part of the diligence team and then you're part of the integration team, you understand the dollars and the way it's structured. Yeah. So that means that you got to be talking with your finance VP, finance director, finance senior manager, and your finance core team member. And usually, and I don't want to put someone in I don't want to, what's the word? Make it so that people seem like they are a certain way. But finance people, a lot of times, aren't the most outgoing. Yeah. So we need to then go to them and find ways to speak their language, understand standard cost, COGS. For those of you that don't know, COGS is cost of goods sold, right? There's a labor portion of it, there's a material portion of it, and there's a burden portion of it. Understand that. Work on our financial acumen across the core team. Number one, are we on track or are we not? And you'll see that by variances at the end of your reporting periods. It's usually monthly. Number two, we have to understand complaints. Complaints out in the field were at a certain rate. There are no devices that go out and have no complaints. Or if there are, I don't know of it. And if those people exist, kudos. But what needs to happen is making sure that our post market team is truly letting us know what's going on. Has a new complaint popped up? Has the frequency about a certain type of complaint popped up? Is there a cosmetic thing going on? I remember I used to be into UVs quite a bit. That's ultraviolet curing, bonding of materials. And when we had actually done an acquisition, this just came to mind. Someone complained about yellowing. Yeah. And yellowing is a sign of a couple of things. If you're a UV person, sure enough, someone on the floor thought one UV system was equivalent to another without understanding frequencies. And sure enough, that yellowing popped up, and the doctor didn't like yellow stuff, right? He wanted things that were pristine. What's happening with the patient? And then finally, really do a touch point on the team on the floor. I hope you all know the concept of Gemba. Yeah. Gemba is a Japanese term that was made famous, back in the 80s, if I remember. But it's really about being where the stuff is happening. Be on the production floor and look at the tier boards. Look at the production boards, I would say. Are things green primarily? Do you see red popping up? And what does that mean, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Why is this thing still in the red? I'm not understanding. So, you as a team member, even if you're regulatory, make your way to the production floor. Ask the supervisor, show me what's up. What is this stuff on the board doing right now? And understand the green or the red. And then finally, during town halls, there is usually a presentation made by the integration lead. And the integration lead will have a group of KPIs, but then there's an overall. So if you have, let's call it 6 KPIs, with safety being one of them, yeah, because you have brought in a hydrofluoric acid process. So we don't want anybody getting their eyes burned out, right? So anyway, you take all of these KPIs together and they'll do the overall health of the integration. That's the one you also want to watch closely during the entire integration period, year, 18 months, whatever it is. Make sure that it's all green. And if it's yellow or red, team, jump all on it. You step in and ask, how can I help? Ooh, I like it. So let's think about what we just talked about. We got the finances, yeah. We got the customer, and then we have the operational things. The first thing we have to integrate is if you have an ERP system, make sure that ERP system, the master data is correct. It just has to be. Once that's squared away, checkbox. We have quality constraints that usually are put first, right? If something goes out of limits or if there's a particular type of issue, then you got to jump all on it. So the SOPs need to be normalized. Yeah. Whatever gaps were found during due diligence and it's quality related or it's regulatory related, they've got to be addressed. So finances, quality, regulatory are the first ones I prioritize. You've all heard of the term nice to have. Yeah. Nice to haves truly need to be, um, I won't say put on the back burner or deprioritized. They really need to be put into buckets. So if it's something that's going to enhance the pro forma, it needs to be considered. If it's something that's going to enhance the cultural connection, it needs to be considered. And then finally, the I would say the lowest is, hey, if these are programmatic savings that we can do in the long term as we scale up, let's deal with that later or make that a stretch assignment for someone that's not stressing out the core team. Yeah, the one that I keep in the top of my brain to talk to a CEO on an elevator if I'm trying to pitch for a job. Once again, it was at Neurovascular, and we had acquired the company that was making our pipeline and pipeline flex product. So this is a flow diverter when people have large aneurysms in the brain and just stuffing in a bunch of coils isn't the best way to go any longer, or overlapping smaller stents inside. They use this pipeline device. So that's the company we acquired. What was so, I thought, educational and experience edifying for me, Pete, is we made multiple trips up there. And because of my personality, I was put as one of the key integrators. And there was a guy who was just prickly. I can't remember his name, and if I could, I wouldn't say it to protect the innocent. But he was just hard to deal with. So we tried different things, and obviously he must have got a lot of money on the side and along the way. So that's between him and the deal makers. But the cool thing about it is that we realized we needed to have him respect our technical capabilities. So we actually brought in two experts. One was a supplier. We had a good relationship with a manufacturer of a piece of equipment. And then a guy on our team who was just solid, just one of the strongest technicians we ever had. And then we had an R&D, so we had three, an R&D engineer, and she's phenomenal. We brought them in, got the CDAs, NDAs signed off. And when we brought them in, based on the comments he made, talking about the cultural fit, he 100% changed his tone. And now he was more willing to share. He was more willing as we failed in doing some things. He then offered, he just didn't sit back with his arms crossed and let us fail. And it took about 3 months, if I remember correctly, for him to get to that point. But I love the courage that we had as an organization to bring people he respected. And then I loved on his end that he loved the patients enough that then he softened his stance and his approach in order to collaborate with us. And at the end of the day, now, Pete, I think that's the best flow diverter in the world, unless something's happened the last 10 years I don't know about. Keep the executive team engaged all the way through the pro forma period and find a way to do that that is palatable to them. Use it as a training opportunity for the core team and for the business to learn how to engage the executive team, and then celebrate more along the way where appropriate. You just can't underestimate, team, what recognition and celebration does for morale. Thank you, Square One. Ciao.